Many of history's best inventions were duds, accidents, and failures. Here are 10 accidental inventions to show you that the greatest of stuff isn't always carefully laid out in a plan. Welcome to One Away. Make sure to watch this video, as some of these inventions were experiments gone wrong, and some even sold their discoveries for profit. Before that, please give us a like if you find this video useful. And subscribe to our channel for updates on our latest videos. Cries in malaria. Some accidental inventions or discoveries might not always have a great product. In the case of William Perkin, he came up with a discovery that derailed from an otherwise noble project. Back in 1856, Perkin wanted to make a cure for the then dreaded illness of malaria, which had been quite rampant at the time. Then again, it was at the cusp of a great industrial revolution, and science had tried to find solutions to the industrial consequences, malaria included. Others included scurvy for out-of-bounds explorers and rickets for those who had no sun due to the London city fog. Perkins, in his search for the cure on malaria, was no different. What was different was his discovery and his decisions after. The main cure candidate from his laboratory involved the replication of a compound known as quinine. Instead of a cure, he found one of the colors mauve. As part of the boom of science and industry at the time, Perkins put aside his noblest of goals and made a company that sold synthetic dyes instead. Could you imagine if a laboratory, hell-bent to find a cure for a widespread virus that kills many people, only to put it off and sell something else? The joy of leftovers. Sometimes, an accidental discovery demands you give time for the accident to happen. For example, when Will and John Kellogg decided to leave off a pot of cereal grain on their stove for a couple of days, they found what would become the blueprint for their patented Kellogg's Corn Flakes. The author Michael Pollan highlights a similarly accidental discovery, but in the theory of bread, one of the most loved foodstuffs in the world. It's the discovery that the Kellogg's made, but took to a deeper level. Supposedly in ancient Egypt, one of the staple dishes made from cereal grains was porridge. At one point or another, a cook left out a bowl of porridge on the table. After a long interruption, the cook would have noticed that the porridge had bubbles, and decided to cook it. This, of course, is what bakers know as fermentation. From there, the aroma of bread would have been found, which delighted the cook and turned them to a baker. Which makes it less of a surprise that Sir Alexander Fleming made his discovery in an eerily similar manner as well. Not with cereal flakes, not with cereal turned to bread by bacteria, but with bacteria itself. Fleming had studied a great deal of the biology of bacteria when he had grown tired of it one day. When he left his medical experiments, he came back to a surprise. Mold. Specifically, mold that broke the surrounded bacteria. He then grew the mold and discovered the strong antibiotic compound known as penicillin. The joy of leftovers, fun times, productive times. Miracle discoveries can happen on fun occasions. Everyday stuff, as some people would say. Until its recognition by many scientists, nitrous oxide was either a fun toy to bring around or a dangerous chemical. Either case, nitrous oxide made people supposedly howl like hyenas. This probably surprised people back in 1884, when it became a precursor accident to one of the most used medical triage for emergencies and operations. A friend of Horace Wells took a substantial dose of the chemical when they were at a laughing gas show. Wells' friend gashed his leg in the event but hadn't noticed pain at the time. This led Wells and company to think that it was probably the compound itself. Soon after, much research took place on this literal accidental discovery and found the earliest medically sanctioned form of anesthesia. A brand of wine. Despite what one may think of an invention, there are inventions that are just that lucky. Take brandy as an example. Legends say that it was an invention of a Dutch shipmaster, back in the 16th century. In an effort to make transports of wine to other places that much convenient, the shipmaster made his choice. Leave off the rest of the wines for the next trip, or heat them. He would then reconstitute the wine upon his arrival to designated places. Little did he realize, it would soon become a trend, and eventually a prized invention. It turns out, many people love concentrated wine. From the burnt wine origins of the Dutch brandewine, the product is known as brandy, has been recognized in many ships, countries, and family traditions. Far more than others can say of their wine, brandy has become a label all to itself. Boil them, fry them, put them in a stew. If you ask Gordon Ramsay, most chefs are just donkeys. Which is to say, mediocre chefs earn Ramsay's hate more than his love. But, some chefs are just that inventive. Such was the case with George Crumb, whose genius prank would land him in the annals of food nerd history. The story, as told by a good many, as is common restaurant folklore, starts out with the annoyance of a customer. The customer had asked repeatedly for his French fries, thinner and crispier. As an equal joke, Crumb then cut them to the size and thinness of wafers. Crumb had made it, the potato wafers came out delicious, and the customer was quite pleased. The potato chip was born. Since then, the addition of extra crispy and the potato chip had crossed over to many in the food industry, our supermarkets included. A Hot Pocket. Without the discovery of this device, it's difficult to imagine what life would have been like. Although many fitness buffs argue that the microwave isn't all that good for you, this invention has made frozen dinners quite convenient. And frozen food in general. The world has Percy Spencer to thank for the accidental discovery of the microwave. Originally as an experiment in 1946 for a radar vacuum tube, he soon discovered a system for the generation of heat. When he worked on this experiment, Spencer noticed a sensation of heat in a candy bar from his pocket. He then noticed that the candy bar had melted. He then put 2 and 2 together and made the refocused on his microwave invention. Soon after, for better or for worse, the food industry answered and capitalized on it, particularly for tired busy mothers. The world of family breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and snacks were never the same. The safety of the glass. Most scientists today rarely, if ever, come upon inventions that were discovered by accident. Most labs have projects with a clear framework and a deadline, from start to finish, almost like clockwork. And many commit to expanding already formed studies, as a matter of authority. But, back in the day, scientific breakthroughs weren't always cut and dry. That in part was the case with Edouard Benedictus, a chemist who worked in his lab on an altogether different project. When a glass flask of his had dropped, it surprisingly didn't break into pieces. No doubt curious or probably concerned, Benedictus concluded that it didn't break as the flask contained and lined up by a plastic cellulose nitrate. Due to this, the chemist eventually went on to patent the discovery into what we know of today as safety glass. Many know this material from its usage in cars or in gas masks, the latter of which was needed for many hazardous occupations and events. Ergo, the acid. Probably no discovery has as much division and controversy behind than that of psychedelic drugs. But, its discovery was part accident and part miscalculation, on the part of Albert Hofmann. He had begun a study in his lab of the fungus ergot. Only, Hofmann began this study with a derivative or a concentrate form of this fungus. Unsurprisingly to what many call acid heads today, Hofmann had what is known as a trip. Hofmann experienced various kinds of hallucinations, as well as a number of physical sensations. He was, from the viewpoint of academia, one of the first to discover the alteration power of plant drugs. Plant drugs were mostly part of ancient tribes as a medicine to heal or guide, but Hofmann was arguably the first to put it for academic study after his experiences. This compound came as lysergic acid diethylmide or LSD, which along with psilocybin or the magic mushroom, became 2 of the most infamous plant drugs. Infamous in part because it began a radical charge of consciousness inside and outside, back in 60s America. This gained traction by a charismatic professor named Timothy Leary, who had encouraged its use, and for that was discredited. In an interview from 1985, he was all but happy to have made LSD and other drugs part of psychology discussion. To paraphrase Leary, "I'm happy to be discredited. I don't want credibility, I want incredibility." This may have been an accident on the part of Hofmann, but many plant drugs convert are all but happy that it happened. Do you have a list of experiments that can make an impact in the world? Were there experiments gone wrong that might have helped the world? If you're interested in silly putty and Play-Doh, you want to hear what Lego and other companies originally started out as, in our video on 8 companies that reinvented themselves.